Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. In the continuing media and political ass freakout over President Joe Biden's campaign for re-election, there's one pretty important fact that gets missed almost entirely. And I've been thinking about it a lot. The president has done nothing wrong. You wouldn't know that from a lot of the coverage. Part of what has been weird and difficult about this news cycle day in, day out is that Biden's political future is being covered like a scandal, right? And we have seen plenty of presidential scandals in recent years. We've seen a president get impeached twice in one term for behavior that's completely beyond any standard of decency or sanity, including attempting to end the American constitutional republic. We've seen a civil jury conclude the ex-president also sexually assaulted a woman and continually defamed her. We've seen that former president indicted for election interference, convicted of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. And just to be clear again, Joe Biden has done nothing like that. As president, he's reached out to build a political coalition that has managed some really genuinely shocking policy victories, things I truly didn't think were going to happen. He held that coalition together long enough to pass the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure improvements, the first gun safety reforms in decades. He completed the long overdue U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and took heat for its chaotic execution. And he's led America through the aftermath of COVID, incredibly difficult era, and the best economic stewardship in the developed world with humility and industry. So at the heart of all this, right, the heart of what we're talking about when we're talking about this story and the coverage of it is not a scandal. There is no wrongdoing. The heart of it is the fact that an old man has gotten older. And he's gotten older in ways that are not necessarily predictable because aging isn't, after having the most stressful job in the world for 3 years. And it has very clearly taken a toll on him. We can all see that. And now, in the next 4 months, he has to do the only thing that may be harder than being president, more stressful and more demanding, which is to be president while also running for re-election. Those are both full-time jobs. Beyond the incredible media feeding frenzy that feels like a scandal is the one very obvious question, which is, at 81, having been the president now, with all that stress, is President Biden capable of enduring the unbelievably taxing task of running the country and being a candidate who can persuade unpersuaded American voters in order to defeat Donald Trump? That is genuinely a difficult thing to do at any age, but particularly when you're 81. The White House has tried to tamp down on all this. They've been reaching out to congressional leaders and trying to signal that it was kind of case closed, right? All this talk after the debate of is Biden going to go or not? Is he going to be the Democratic nominee? That, look, the process has run its course. People could have run against him in the primary. We're a month out from the convention. He's the president of the United States. Everything's run its course. It is what it is. Everything else is noise. But ultimately, I think what is weighing very clearly in public and private on all members of the Democratic Party and the larger Democratic coalition is Joe Biden's ability to run the campaign necessary to run against the headwinds he faces, part of which is questions about his age, and defeat the threat from Donald Trump. And again, we don't know the future, but the data we have right now does not look good. It just doesn't. And for anyone watching this, right, who's thinking that they're sick of the pundits and the know-it-alls and also the stress of this hand-wringing, I have found this pretty tough to cover and watch as well, right? It is wrenching in a certain way, partly because the stakes are so high. But it's worth listening to some of the Democratic voices who are now expressing doubts publicly, because they are people who've known Biden and the political stakes for years. And these people aren't glib, and they're not just like tossing off columns. People like moderate Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, who on Tuesday night became the first Senate Democrat to just publicly say President Joe Biden can't win the election. He confirmed that he had told his colleagues as much in a private meeting on Capitol Hill.
Donald Trump is on track, I think, to win this election and maybe win it by a landslide and take with him the Senate and the House. And so for me, this isn't a question about polling. It's not a question about politics. It's a moral question about the future of our country. And I think it's critically important for us to come to grips with what we face if together we put this country on the path of electing Donald Trump.
Now, the Bennett interview stood out to me. He didn't actually call for Biden to step down, but you could kind of intuit that. It stood out to me because in a Senate that's, full of a lot of grandstanders and showbitters, Michael Bennett is not that. He's not a guy who goes out of his way to get a ton of attention. He's clearly saying this, again, in that kind of halting, anguished way because he believes it. And because it's what, again, all the available data we have is showing right now, imperfect as it may be. Now, in the past hour, Bennett's Democratic colleague, Senator Peter Welch of Vermont, published an opinion piece in the Washington Post calling for Biden to drop out of the race. He's the first senator, I believe, on the record calling for that. This morning, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi weighed in. Now, no one has more experience and more of a stake in leading Democrats to unify and get in line for the good of the party than Nancy Pelosi, and here's what she said.
Does he have your support to be the head of the Democratic ticket?
As long as the president has it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. I think overwhelming support of the caucus. It's not for me to say. I'm not the head of the caucus anymore, but he's beloved. He is respected, and people want him to make that decision, not me.
He has said he has made the decision. He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do, and that's the way it is.
She didn't say Joe Biden is the guy. I mean, she could have. She very obviously and intentionally didn't say that. We all saw that, right? You saw what she was doing there. She said Joe Biden has to decide. Even though he's decided, he still has to decide. It is a remarkable thing for Nancy Pelosi to say. In large part because this is not a person who is caught up in news frenzies and news cycles. She's pushed back hard against similar Democratic panics in the past. She knows from them. Remember back in 2009, I remember covering this as the Nation correspondent in Washington, D.C., when longtime Democratic Senator Ted Kennedy died and Massachusetts voters in a special election replaced him, shockingly, with a Republican, a guy named Scott Brown. And with that, it meant that Democrats had lost their filibuster-proof majority, 60 votes, which meant they could not pass Obamacare through the Senate again, had to come back from conference committee. And the party was utterly demoralized and shocked and in genuine disarray. And pundits and politicians were saying, that was it. We lost. That's the end of health care reform. We can't pass it through the Senate. It's dead. It's dead. It's dead. It was Barack Obama, first of all, and Nancy Pelosi, who just ignored the media drama and ignored the hand-wringing and ignored the pundits who whipped members on the phone and who found the way forward and got that historic legislation passed by passing the identical Senate bill through the House. That was her. The following year, when President Obama signed Obamacare into law, remember what then Vice President Biden told him in earshot of the mic, it was a big effing deal. And I say all this to demonstrate the fact that Nancy Pelosi has shown that kind of hold-the-line savvy time and time and again over Democrats. Whether it was waiting for the right time to open impeachment articles against Donald Trump or squeezing an infrastructure bill through warring party factions. And the fact that Nancy Pelosi is now out there leaving the door open for Biden to do something other than run for re-election suggests to me she really thinks there is a dire need for the party to do something dramatic and drastic and risky. Let's be clear, risky, basically unprecedented, but to her mind and I think others necessary in the face of what's happening. And she's obviously hedging, but it speaks to the depth of people's concerns, especially among those who have known the president for years, like actor and Democratic activist George Clooney, who has been toasted by the president for the Kennedy Senator Honors, who held a fundraiser for Biden just weeks ago. And in a New York Times opinion piece today, Clooney declared it was time for Biden to step down, writing, "I love Joe Biden," he wrote. "I consider him a friend and I believe in him, believe in his character, believe in his morals. In the last 4 years, he's won many of the battles he's faced. But the one battle he cannot win is a fight against time. None of us can. It's devastating to say it, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago, the fundraiser, was not the Joe big effing deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we witnessed at the debate. We can put our heads in the sand and pray for a miracle in November, or we can speak the truth. Joe Biden is a hero who saved democracy in 2020. We need him to do it again in 2024. Clooney's observations are not unique. Joe Biden is a decent man who, like I said, has done nothing wrong. He hasn't been caught in a scandal. He is just aging. And that reality makes him, I think, increasingly likely to lose re-election to a Republican candidate who, again, is just a few years younger, we're going to be in the same boat a few years from now, we elect him, and who has done a lot wrong, a shocking amount wrong, and who's promised to do more wrong if he wins. And again, there is no conversation about whether he should drop out because that candidate's party is too afraid to ask him to step aside or do anything against him, because any suggestion from any Republican that Donald Trump should step aside for the good of their party or the country or face accountability for his many crimes and sins is met with rabid rhetorical attacks, excommunication, and often death threats. Donald Trump really wants you to believe he's just nothing to do with Project 2025, the 900-page wish list of far-right proposals should he win the presidency. He has gone so far as to claim, quote, "I have no idea who's behind it." One of the guys behind it is John McEntee, seen here holding Donald Trump's bag. McEntee used to be Trump's body man, basically personal assistant with him all the time, during the early years of the Trump administration. It did not end well.
He was literally the man closest to the president, Johnny McEntee, President Trump's personal assistant, his body man, abruptly forced out of his post and escorted off the White House grounds Monday. NBC News confirming McEntee is under investigation by the Secret Service for serious financial crimes.
According to the Wall Street Journal, McEntee was a habitual gambler, betting tens of thousands of dollars at a time, and was deemed a security risk as a result. Then Chief of Staff to the President, John Kelly, effectively had him tossed off the White House premises. We should note he was not ever charged with the crime. But in spite of it all, McEntee is nothing if not loyal to Donald Trump. Former college football player and Fox News production assistant was such a strong believer in Trump's message that back in 2015, he repeatedly cold emailed the Trump campaign begging for a job before the campaign eventually brought him on as a volunteer and then as a paid staffer. McEntee was so committed to the cause that he worked out of this space in Trump Tower, 3 walls and an unfinished floor. And his loyalty to the boss paid off. After Trump fired John Kelly, remember, because he kept hiring people and then he would say they're idiots and they're terrible and get rid of them, right? So after he fired John Kelly, who's one of those people, as chief of staff, guess what? He brought McEntee back, the guy that had been deemed a security risk, this time as, wait for it, director of the presidential personnel office. So basically, he was the guy who decides who gets to work for the president, the guy escorted off of the White House by Secret Service. And in that role, McEntee worked to purge staffers deemed insufficiently loyal while ensuring that only the most rabid Trump toadies got jobs in the White House. He was also deeply involved with Trump's attempted coup, including the efforts to pressure Mike Pence to reject the results of the 2020 election, with journalist John Karl calling him the man who made January 6th possible. Now, after that coup failed and they had to leave office, McEntee spun his notoriety into a career of something of a conservative influencer, selling MAGA Men a conservatives-only dating app. That sounds fun. And posting absolutely deranged videos like this on social media.
So I always keep this fake Hollywood money in my car, so when a homeless person asks for money, then I give them like a fake $5 bill. So I feel good about myself, they feel good. And then when they go to use it, they get arrested. So I'm actually like helping clean up the community, you know, getting them off the street.
Okay, so McEntee says it was a joke. A weird one. Gross, I think. Why are we talking about John McEntee? Well, here's why. That guy is a senior advisor of Project 2025. Specifically, he's an advisor to the Presidential Personnel Database. That is a project to staff the White House in the event Trump wins in November, which means the grifting, gambling Jan 6 henchman, who is too much of a security issue for the Trump administration, is going to be the guy vetting resumes the second time around. Is that someone you want in charge of the most important personnel office in the country?
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.